One of the big things is how do we reduce the cost of prefabrication, especially on existing buildings? How do we get more of those companies out there? And how do we make sure that that quality in the installation on site when you put everything together is adequate?
Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration and connections from all flavours of Passive House, check out passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your questions answered and contribute to the community dialogue. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passive House journey. We hope to see you at one of our weekly Passive House Accelerator live webinars. You can also check out our Reimagined Buildings YouTube channel for some great inspiration for both building new or renovating. In the meantime, here's this week's Passive House podcast. Hello, welcome back to the Passive House podcast. I'm Matthew Cutler-Welsh, coming to you from Auckland, New Zealand. And this week we're welcoming back Ilka and Mary. Ilka, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Weather is very pleasant right now, and I'm looking forward to a couple of days at the Jersey Shore.
Nice. Mm-hmm. Sounds good. And you've been pretty busy lately, as I think everyone has. But good to hear back from you. And Mary, how are you going?
Excellent. I almost feel guilty about what a pleasant summer we've been having here. It continues to be just lovely, and
not too hot.
Not too hot. Just summer weather, and starting to see. I mean, it's dry, no doubt about it. And we are in the midst of ongoing fire hardening work at our house, just because we know it may be pleasant now, but who knows what's going to happen in the fall. So
Zach, I think last time we spoke, it was also very pleasant, and you were avoiding most of the heat. Is that still being the case?
That continues to be the case, and it also, I feel like I feel like Mary, I almost feel guilty about it. I also avoided the heat I was just in Massachusetts for the Building Science Corporation's Building Science Summer Camp, which was super fun in Westford, Massachusetts. And Massachusetts can be quite hot and humid this time of year, but it was very nice as well. Very pleasant. Really, really fun trip.
I feel like we need to acknowledge summer camp. As some of our audience will know about summer camp, so quite a big thing to have attended. I feel like we should probably talk about that in some future episode.
Yeah, definitely. It's just real fast. It's the Westford Building Science Symposium put on by Building Science Corp. And Building Science Corp is, a powerhouse in building science thought leadership and kind of application, and also played a key role in FIAS, the development of FIAS's climate specific targets, and there's a real strong relationship with FIAS and their work. So a really important group of people, fun to hang out with them.
Just in case some people thought you were hanging out with your kids at
summer camp,
at a lake, doing some canoeing or something.
No, not this time.
It was not that.
No, not at all.
All right, good stuff. Okay, well we've got a great chat this week that Ilka and Mary, an interview that you did a couple of weeks ago. So we're going to get into that, but before we do, we've got a few people to thank, Zach.
Indeed. So a big thank you to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Baxtingui Architects, Glavel, Minitaire, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, Partel, Rockwell North America, Stillcorp, and Zola Windows. Thank you as well to our champion sponsors, Bewizo, Gradient, Icon Windows and Doors, Intelligent Membranes, PH Air Seal, Proseco, and Source 2050. And a big thank you to our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority.
Right. All right. Now, Bright Power's no stranger to the Passive House Accelerator. We've featured them and members of their team on various lives, indeed a previous podcast episode, and Bright Power being featured in articles and many projects that have been highlighted on the Accelerator.
Andrea Mancino is now CEO of Bright Power. She started there as an intern 11 years ago. And, it was just a great story that she moved up through the organization and is now CEO. So I think that's inspiring for anybody who's starting out. Hey, I can move up. I can get experience and learn about an organization from inside. And
yeah, definitely. All right. I found it very inspiring. So let's get straight into it.
Welcome, Andrea Mancino, CEO of Bright Power. It's so great to have you join us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background, how you got interested in building efficiency?
Sure. I started off as working at Con Edison and wasn't that interested in the work that I was doing. So I started doing residential energy audits, and I landed a internship at Bright Power about 11 years ago and have since worked my way up through the company from intern to CEO. So it's a pretty exciting story from started at the bottom, made your way to the top, and I'm very proud of that.
And I'm sure you're very, very familiar with all the work that Bright Power does, right? Can you tell us a little bit more?
Sure. So we offer energy efficiency and sustainability services for real estate owners and developers and property managers for multifamily buildings. So we focus on existing buildings and ground up new construction. On the existing building side, we do everything from energy audits to retrofit, consulting and making sure that the work actually gets done and the interventions are put in place in the building. We have utility analytics with our energy scorecards. And on the ground up new construction side, we provide sort of holistic energy efficiency and sustainability consulting and green certification programs and incentive procurement. So we're there during the design of a building, whether it's LEED or Passive House or any particular certification. We start at the concept of the design and help select systems that make sense, energy efficient building envelope, all the way down to the materials that are selected in the building, making sure that they're not carbon intensive and that they're healthy for the residents. So we provide sort of an array of services throughout the life cycle of a building. So we're sort of always there and always able to provide something one way or another.
And how much of your work involves new construction versus existing buildings?
About 50-50, believe it or not. Yeah, we obviously the new construction cycle is a lot longer. So you're with a building for, 5 years sometimes, whereas in existing buildings, we kind of crank through a lot more and you do the work and then, you kind of move on. So I would say it's probably about 50-50, but the new construction projects seem to last forever.
And do you offer Passive House services for both existing and new buildings?
We do. Yes, we do. Predominantly, our Passive House work is in new construction. The idea of EnerFit or any type of Passive House standard with existing buildings, we actually haven't gotten past the feasibility phase of that on the existing building side. So while we offer the service, there's been a lot of being trigger shy to actually do the work because primarily due to the upfront cost and the amount of intervention needed, to make the building, to remove residents or maybe not. But we've been a part of a lot of different studies with NYSERDA, a lot of working groups, a lot of pilots where we've been trying to do those deep energy retrofits as part of pilot projects that have a lot of money to that's injected into it to spur the market and figure out what's repeatable and how to address some of the particular challenges on the existing building side.
And when you started as an intern, did Bright Power already offer Passive House services or did that come later?
It came later. Yeah. I mean, when I started as an intern, people were still upset about CFL light bulbs as opposed to incandescence. It was like, oh my God, what's this? They're different color. And, now that type of thing is a standard. And I've seen the sort of the momentum in the industry and the standards change over the time that I've been there. And I was one of the people that started actually co-founded the new construction group in Bright Power. So we saw a lot of different developers coming to us, particularly because of financing regulations for affordable housing. In order to get money to build a building, you have to build to a certain standard of energy efficiency in New York. And so that spurred a lot of it's compliance driven, but it spurred the affordable housing industry to actually become a lot more efficient and better built housing than market rate and luxury in New York, because of, some of the laws that were put in place. So the passive house services came later, and we've seen a huge year over year uptick in passive house projects, and people just getting a lot more comfortable with repeating it over and over. So it's become a standard for a lot of our clients to just build the passive house every time they have a new project. And that's very unprecedented over the last 10 years, but heading in the right direction.
So that's great.
Yeah.
So at this point, what percentage roughly of the firm's business is passive house related?
Of the maybe probably because we do a lot of stuff. So of the new construction work that we do predominantly passive house services in, I would probably say it's up to about 65% of the work that we do, but we're seeing over 100% year over year growth. So it started, maybe 3 years ago, we had 5 projects or 6 projects. Now we've got, 20, 30, 40 in the pipeline. So it's just an exponential growth that we're seeing, and it's been great.
Yeah, it's amazing. So when did you become a passive house consultant? Because you're FIA certified, correct?
Yes. I think I would say about 5 years ago.
Okay.
So I took the course, and I worked on, I was a project manager at one point, and then I was the director of the team that offers these services. Sort of spearheaded some of our first passive house projects that we ever did. I've worked on a whole bunch of them, including one of the largest, at the time, every year you get beaten out, but it was the largest affordable housing passive house FIA certified project in the whole country.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing.
And what's that one in upstate New York?
No, this one's Park Avenue Green in the Bronx.
Oh.
So it was a large, densely populated, affordable housing building built in the Bronx.
So maybe just going back really quickly to your background, were you always interested in energy efficiency?
Yes, I was. I mean, I'm an environmental science major, so it covers a lot of things. It's very cliche, but An Inconvenient Truth by Al Gore spurred my interest in climate change. And then I just sat down and did a bunch of research on what types of jobs that you could possibly get, to address, global warming, climate change, whatever you want to call it. And I stumbled upon energy auditing and said, this is interesting. And so I didn't actually have a particular, training in that work. I started as an intern, and the best training that I could get was hands-on in the field experience and working with a lot of mentors and people that were senior to me. And that just spurred my ability to be able to continue growing, apart from, other certifications as well.
That's great. I mean, it's so inspiring, I would think, to other people who are might have a similar question about, okay, I'm majoring in environmental sciences, but where do I go from here where my work is going to be effective? So it's great to hear about.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I love to, share that experience as well. A lot of people would say, I don't want to tell anyone I was an intern because now I'm a CEO and I need to look like I've always had my, been perfect and been senior. But, I just find that sharing that experience with our current intern cohort and some of the people that are working their way up, that sort of mentorship and workforce development is really important to me.
Speaking of, now that you're CEO, can you tell me how does it feel and your new responsibilities? I'm sure you're taking on new responsibilities. How are those? And what, if anything, are you changing about Bright Power?
Good questions. It feels great to be, able to make change from the top down, positive change where it's needed or where I felt it's needed. I've been at the company for a really long time, so I've seen what's worked, what hasn't. I've seen people come and go. And so I've kind of collected all of those experiences and merged that into how I would want to run the organization, having, served and lived in the organization. It's always a challenge. You always sort of feel like there's something that you haven't done yet, or something you haven't done, or someone that might not be happy, with you, but you have to sort of be comfortable living in being uncomfortable. And I think that that's what keeps you on your toes and keeps you constantly pushing yourself to do better, do more, and question yourself in a healthy way, in a healthy and confident way. Do I need to keep your finger on the pulse? Do I need to adjust what I'm doing? How are people feeling? What is the response I'm getting? How is our attrition rate? How are our customers? And just sort of that constant self-awareness of how you're addressing the organization keeps you constantly learning and adapting. And I think that that's really important as a CEO, not to be stuck in your ways. And as far as changing anything, I mean, our biggest challenge right now, it's a good problem to have, but with the Inflation Reduction Act and the money being injected into the space and all of the passive house work that we have, one of the biggest things is we've been waiting for this opportunity forever. It's here. It's happening more and more over the years, but we don't have enough workforce. I don't have enough skilled people we've got more work on hand than we can possibly muster. And so really my thoughts have been pairing with local organizations, with colleges, with workforce development groups to figure out how we can get skilled. One of the places that we have the hardest issue finding people is passive house, experienced passive house consultants or people that can kind of plug in and have the technicality. And so I'm constantly trying to figure out, rather than just poach people from different, competitors in the industry, which is basically us just moving the same finite resources around, how do we put more of those resources into the industry so that there's enough for everyone? And that's really where my head's been at lately.
That's kind of a good problem to have, right?
It is a good problem.
It's been taking a while to get there. So yes. Do you see the same challenges with building passive houses, or is that a little easier to come by skilled labor?
It's better than it was a couple of years ago because of this repeat sort of process of using, we have a lot of our clients like to use the same design team, the same construction team for the most part, give or take a few players. But that repeatability has really improved the ability to build passive house and build it to a good standard of quality, because there's getting it done and then there's actually the proper quality involved. But with all of the demand, we are short on that side as well. The same like 5 contractors, they're growing like crazy trying to hire as well. But there's only so much of them to go around as well. So it's a problem prevalent throughout design, consulting, and the construction side.
So are you looking into prefabrication as well? I mean, that's kind of one way to scale it up, correct? Yes.
That's one of those, when I mentioned the pilots that we've been working on with like the NYSERDA, which is a New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. They sort of are spurring the market and injecting capital into how to decarbonize the built environment in New York. And one of the big things is, how do we reduce the cost of prefabrication? How do we, especially on existing buildings, how do we get more of those companies out there? And how do we make sure that quality in the installation on site, when you put everything together, is adequate? And we have seen with prefabrication that, when you bring the pieces to the site, one of the major issues is actually air sealing. So, that you put them together and they fit well, but there's that level of detail of just like getting around everything that you need to. And you would think that would be able to be, something that you can just go on site and you only have to, do a couple areas, but it's been a problem. But it's something that we can remedy over time. And I think I have high hopes for that.
Yeah, with air sealing, I mean, that's a lot of coordination up front, correct?
Exactly.
Because there's so much about sequencing. Yeah,
Exactly.
especially with prefabrication, because once the next part comes in, if you didn't put down your membrane leader, it's really, really hard to mitigate that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's mainly communication and sequencing, to your point. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
So have you worked prefab on an existing building or only new construction?
We have tried to work prefab on existing buildings. So this is called Retrofit New York, the pilot I'm talking about. I think there's 5 different teams. We were one of the 5. Our project ended up not actually implementing the prefab, the panels over the existing building, but 2 of the other teams did. And it was really interesting. They had like a laser that came and measured everything. They had these prefab panels manufactured. They had to take into account in New York all the like very intricate details of pre-war buildings on the exterior facade. Figure out where to run the refrigerant piping. It was very, very unique and very interesting. But it was a lot of money. So, it was a learning experience, but bringing that cost down to make this sort of something that we can make prevalent throughout the industry is still probably a couple of years out.
But everything else is changing so quickly, so maybe that will too.
Exactly. And we're aware of it. And I think that that's the first step, right? Is you got to try it out in a couple different places. You have to find out that it's expensive. You have to find out that it's complicated, and you have to sort of play to that. And with the awareness comes the change. So we're there at this point. It's just a matter of time and capital.
So one advantage of prefabrication that I think is pretty big too is that once you commit to a certain assembly, that becomes your spec, right? So it's fairly easy to early on specify materials that way and look at embodied carbon. Is that something that you are looking at and calculating as well?
Yes, it is. We have done a couple life cycle assessments and embodied carbon calculations. And we've been working in parallel with a couple architects. And so what I find, is that when the architect is aware of embodied carbon and about specifying those materials and doing that ahead of time and running those calculations, it really makes our lives easier. So, we end up having battles with a lot of design teams when they're not, bought into that. So our best projects that have taken into account all of that have been with particular, a little bit more innovative architectural firms that also are bought into that idea. And that's been really successful.
Yeah. And one thing that I'm curious about, I actually just came back from Germany, and it seems like there people are really starting to think about circularity. So, and since you're like on the pulse of everything, is that something that you see coming up as well here?
Circularity in the sense of what?
Reusing materials. Like really looking at, there's kind of hashtag urban mining index.
Right. There's not as much of that in New York at the moment. I think it's something that you hear a lot about at conferences, and it's a new buzzword, but I haven't actually seen a ton of reuse in even existing buildings that, unless you are going after the credit for LEED or something like that. But it's not completely intentional yet, but I think that's another thing that's probably going to be on the horizon fairly soon.
Yeah, I think it's about reusing, but also to start thinking about like buildings that you build now, how in the future materials can be reused.
Yes.
Right.
The same thing.
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah.
One thing that I'm very pleased about is that, New York has some of the most aggressive energy codes in the United States, and the new code that we're making, I'm on the committee to develop the code, and what they're changing is they are, we're working towards an energy code that's basically passive house by 2030, and we're pretty far along considering just pushback and different and cost and things like that. But they're emphasizing that the building envelope has the, longest useful life in a building. At the end of the day, it's going to be there for a long time. And so build it efficient, build it with the right materials, start there, and then you downsize your systems. Even if you don't necessarily go electrification, you need less of, any fossil fuel type system. But they're starting to think about useful life and putting stuff in there that's going to last and that's going to, have a proper benefit in terms of performance. And that was the first time that I've seen that from a code. And I thought that was really intriguing too.
Yeah, it's really sometimes surprising to me. I mean, you walk around neighborhoods and you can see buildings that are 100 years old. And so the whole envelope first attitude shouldn't be surprising, right? Because we see this all over, and yet still people balk at an envelope first process.
Absolutely.
But congratulations on being on the energy code committees. I know that's quite a time-consuming commitment.
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, you get a little of the inside scoop before it's public, and that's always cool too. So New York's a great place to be right now in terms of high performance buildings.
Really, NYSERDA is doing some excellent work.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And you mentioned just briefly the IRA money coming in. And can you just elaborate on that a little bit? Like what kind of, how are you seeing it affecting your business?
Sure. So it's coming through from the federal level and then also down trickling through to the state level as well. So NYSERDA is gunning for a chunk of the money to filter through their programs. We have a lot of lenders and sort of banks and institutions like that are getting money through the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. So what they're going to start doing is trickling that through in terms of housing and offering better mortgage rates by doing energy efficiency and things like that, where they're, able to basically make the terms of a mortgage like really favorable if you're going to build a building or refinance or whatever it might be, as long as you do more energy efficiency and decarbonization work. And for us, we work with those different types of lenders and banks to actually figure out how to deploy the capital. So like what tools do you need? What programs? Like how are you actually going to do this in practicality? Who's verifying everything? So we're sort of a partner on that front. And then on the federal level, there's different programs. HUD just released a program incentivizing, a variety of measures, and it's really lucrative, whether it's just prescriptive measure installation when you're refinancing your building to net zero standards gets you a whole lot of money. And they also have a program or a cohort that helps people that just don't know what the heck they're doing to get the right level of assessment and it's like advisory of like, how are you going to do this? What do you need to do? Let's do a walkthrough. Let's do a climate risk assessment and whatever else it might be. And we're talking, millions of dollars per project, which is really unprecedented. Then it comes in the forms of all these tax credits and things that are complicated and boring. But at the end of the day, there's just different ways to seize it, everything from directly to the building owner to lenders and institutions. It's coming down from all different areas and everyone's trying to grab a piece. So we try to kind of facilitate either doing the work and getting the certifications and the audits and whatever it might be, all the way down to like, how do you deploy this? What do you need to do? And how can we help you build a program that's gonna work to help decarbonization?
So do I understand correctly that then that funding that goes into the projects basically pays for your services?
And then some, and a lot of the incentive programs out there, kind of covered our costs, and like maybe there was a couple, $1,000 or, 50,000 for upfront costs and whatever else. So it was really just covering the soft services, but now It's the services that we provide and the hard costs of the upfront, installation. And that's really what was needed. Heat pumps, domestic hot water, heat pump, hot water heaters, ERVs, more wall insulation, better windows. That's what it's covering now. The switch from fossil fuels to electrification, it's literally getting that money into that and offsetting that. And that's just like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah. And I'm actually always curious about maintenance of the buildings. Is that because there needs to be quite a bit of education associated with that. Is that a service that you provide as well, or
it is?
Yeah,
it is. But it's still like the ugly stepchild. It's like the neglected thing.
It's so important.
It really is. It really is. And that's definitely important. And especially as buildings get more complex, and you have more, filter replacements, whatever it might be. And so we offer that. And we also have a sort of real-time energy management service where we can put specific sensors in the building and monitor the equipment through a cloud, and essentially work with the staff to say, why did your domestic hot water spike to 150 degrees? That's a scalding hazard. Oh, well, someone had, didn't have enough hot water. So I cranked up the aquastat. Well, you got to bring it back down. So we also provide that support in real time to which in turn trains the staff as well by being there and being a partner to them. So that's something that I really love, just that ongoing kind of keep the peaks, the spikes from happening and keep it even. That's really important.
Yeah.
But there's not enough of that in the industry.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm also curious, since I just got back from Germany. In Germany, there is, for big buildings, a lot of them are hooked up to district heating. Is that something that happens in New York as well? Because in some ways, you can argue that there's quite a bit of losses getting the heat to the buildings. But then on the other hand, if there's a switch from one, in Germany, for example, from gas to heat pumps or renewable energy, it's just one central system that needs to be switched out, and then everyone gets that. So is that something? That happens in New York, or not at all?
It happens in the wrong ways right now. So we have district steam that runs, it's utility from Con Ed, and it powers, some of the larger skyscrapers. Very inefficient, tons of losses in the transmission of the system. That's why when you go to New York and you see you just see steam coming out of a manhole. That's like the district steam leak. So it's not good. We also have seen sort of campuses of buildings sharing, shared boilers and things like that. But again, really inefficient, tons of leaks, things like that. We're seeing a lot more community solar. So that's sort of something. So the distribution and the sharing of large solar arrays in different communities that people can buy from and benefit off of. But one thing that has been making its way about lately is the idea of district geothermal. So community geothermal. So being able to convert communities onto, even if it's supplementary, not fully geothermal for heating and cooling, but this idea of sort of running the piping and making a large enough system that all of the buildings around it can benefit. But in New York, we've got subways, we have bedrock, we have a lot of things that make it a little bit more complicated in terms of the location that's feasible. But we're seeing that a lot more in New York State more broadly, is just this idea of geothermal for a community on the residential and the multifamily side.
That's exciting, because geothermal is something that's been around for a long time, but it's been so expensive to implement that it hasn't really been practical for most projects. Right.
And in New York, drilling through bedrock, it could eat your whole budget up. But you got to love Europe. There are a couple different proprietary drills that a lot of our companies have brought from Europe over to here that have reduced the cost of geothermal exponentially. Being able to drill down quicker, have a smaller drill that can even fit in the basement of an existing building and go through the foundation. Like you roll it in. It's not this big giant thing. It's getting very creative now, and that's another thing that's a myth, or it wasn't a myth. It was real, but the idea that it's still not cost effective isn't true anymore. It's not cost effective for a lot of applications, but that's on the up and up as well.
Well, especially if you don't have as much opportunity for solar.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And in New York, when you have a tall building with a small footprint, that's not always, you pump, power a couple pumps and maybe some elevators, but it's not going to really reduce your load like crazy.
So going from a much more broader perspective to back to construction, I understand that you're part of the Women in Construction Advocacy Group. Could you tell us a little bit about what that is and why you joined?
Sure. So it's through Procore, which is a construction management software, pretty prevalent in the industry. You use it for everything from like submittal review to plans to submitting invoices and everything like that. And they created this Women in Advocacy Group. And essentially, what it is more than anything is a place to network and women in construction. So, I in my former roles, I'm an office monkey now, unfortunately, but in my former roles, we were on site constantly. Like most of the time, I was the only woman on site. I clearly wasn't actually a builder. I was more of an inspector, but I was out there all the time, almost every day, running tests, doing a whole bunch of stuff, telling a bunch of guys what to do. And with that comes a lot of unique experiences, for lack of a better way to put it. And, the women that I have met, who have it a little bit harder than me, are also likely the only women on site. Usually they're not treated with the most respect. And this, isn't a blanket statement, but it happens a lot. And that's something that's part of the group is share your experiences, what's been happening, and being able to take those experiences and go to specific organizations, to help change, laws and really, talk to different employers. If it's bad enough, we'll actually go talk to different employers and say, you've got to please change your standards around this. Train your staff to treat these women with respect, give equal pay, good leave, policies, things like that. So it's a very broad group that does a lot of different things, but essentially we're there to help each other and make a woman's experience in the construction field better, more equitable, and to get more women out there as well, because there's this perception women aren't strong, women can't handle it, and we're changing that as well.
So do you think that being or have been part of this group informs how you work as a CEO?
100%.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
The training that we provide, both for women and just generally, the respect that we teach, in making sure that, everyone's treated with the right level of respect. It's not just, unique to women either. There's all different types of populations of people that get treated differently, or that require a little bit more attention. Making alliances, just it has definitely helped me a lot. Making sure that we have the right safety policies, making sure that, we're not going into basements alone, just really empowering people. So there's just sort of like watching out and protecting, but also empowering, because it doesn't need to be like you're a woman and so you're this underrepresented population and everyone needs to view you differently, because at the end of the day, what has actually I've gained respect on a construction site by just being like bullish, not taking any crap, and being smart. And that's gained me the respect at the end of the day. So we don't want to put too much, around sensitivity. We want to balance that with do your stuff, get out there, have the confidence, don't take any crap, and just like build your thick skin and get out there and give it right back, if it comes to you. And there's been that balance as well.
Yeah, and I think that because you have all this experience, that you gained all this awareness that sometimes I think is hard for men to relate to, just because they haven't had those experiences, right? So there's definitely a lot of times that argument that in order to make it a little easier for women in the field, a woman has to be kind of in the upper position to provide exactly what you're just describing. So I think this is great. And then also you talked earlier about mentorship. I mean, that's super important as well, that if you come into the field as a woman, if you know there's someone who can help you through something when you're stuck, is so, so important to know that you're not there on your own.
Absolutely. And, that's part of as my philosophy, and what my mentors have taught me in the past, is like, you want to make yourself redundant, and you want the people coming up below you to be better than you ever were. And that's how you build better generations and build better workforce. You don't want to keep anyone beneath you. You don't want to be the best, smartest person in the room. I mean, it's great. Don't get me wrong. Like, it feels good, but like, ultimately you want those people to iterate and build on what you've done. And so that's been really important to me. And so I can sit here and say, I started the new construction group, and, in the time, I think that was maybe, 10 years ago. But in the time that I've moved on and moved up, there have been two leaders since that have been running that group, and, made the templates better, made our consulting better, made the technicality and the quality of the work better. And I'm very proud of that. It wasn't, oh, I failed. And, it was, wow, like, these people are coming in and this thing is evolving. And that feels really, really good.
That is great. And one thing we didn't cover is, does Bright Power work in where? Is it just New York or other states as well?
That's a good question. Our consulting services are primarily in New York. We do utility benchmarking through our proprietary software energy scorecards, utility analytics and benchmarking, and that's nationwide. So we have buildings in our database in all 50 states, hundreds of thousands of buildings at this point. So that we do all over. And we had an office in California that we wound down because we decided not to be in the construction business. So we used to actually do turnkey installations, turnkey retrofits, turnkey solar and battery and cogen installation. And being a construction company and a consulting company, like, both in one, wasn't working for us. So we made a deliberate approach to switch to the software and to our consulting, which brought us back to New York for now. But with this IRA, it's really hard to just stay put in New York. So we're figuring it out. We want to help wherever we can. And that's probably the next frontier for Bright Power as well.
Yeah, I was actually curious how many employees there are at Bright Power approximately, because I checked out your website and it looks very, very impressive. I just couldn't figure out how big you are.
150 employees at this point. Wow. So, yeah. And, a bunch of them are remote, so throughout the country. And then we have our people that do the field work, and they're more local. And most of our staff is in New York.
Right.
That's great. Well, it's been really great talking to you. I'm excited. You're obviously somebody who's passionate about your work, and it's great to have you come in and share it with us on the Accelerator.
Thank you. And thank you for all of the work that you're all doing as well. It's important to get out there and spread the word and tackle it from different angles. So thank you.
Thank you. And let's get some more women in the field.
Amen.
And that was Andrea Mancino, who is CEO of Bright Power. And Mary, at the start there, you said very inspiring, starting out as an intern and now becoming CEO. Very inspiring story. Anything else about that you'd like to mention, or anything that stood out about Andrea's journey and or the work that she's doing?
Well, I really appreciated that she got started in it because of an inconvenient truth, hearing that Al Gore talk about that. And, he has worked so hard to bring climate change to a larger audience, to get people to understand how severe it is. And so it's great to hear one person who was really affected by that and changed her trajectory in life. So
yeah, definitely. What about you, Elka?
Yeah, I found it very inspiring too, especially hearing that she's coming from a background of environmental science. I feel like most of the time when we talk to passive house consultants, or it's mostly architects, or coming from the building industry side. So I think it's great that to hear that even from a broader background, that's something that eventually you can get into and very, very much specialize in, becoming a rater, becoming a passive house consultant, and really, really understanding the building science and mechanics behind it, even without a building background.
Yeah. And then going into energy auditing, and then getting lots of on-site experience. I remember her talking about, I think she explained quite well that experience of being a young female on site and really knowing her stuff and establishing herself and her confidence in that role. And I imagine that's played into her being such a great leader and doing the role that she's doing now. I really like. She talked about asking the question, where can I have the most impact? And I can relate to that, thinking about you're faced with decisions about where to go and what to do. And I think that is a really useful question to say, what role can I play where I can influence the industry or people, or whether it's the local building code or whatever you're trying to do, is where can I have the most impact? And clearly, that's worked out well, because they are growing and have managed to have a lot of influence. And by the activities that Bright Power's had with Passive House Accelerator, it's having a further ripple effect out in the industry as well. Zach, what stood out for you?
Oh, I absolutely loved this interview. I found it very exciting. And you just mentioned Bright Power's kind of involvement in the accelerator. And I want to call out Carmel Pratt, who's a VP at Bright Power. She's one of the co-hosts of the Next Gen edition of Passive House Accelerator Live. And Jose Sosa is also with Bright Power, and he hosts the 101 edition of that. So the Bright Power is very much making major contributions to the accelerator. But 100% year-on-year growth of passive house work in the firm. It's a 150-person firm, and clearly is going to be growing. And then listening to her talk about the impacts of the IRA on her work, it's just like this is what it's about. This is massive. So including things like the scope of their work is clearly going to go beyond New York, thanks to because of this IRA stuff, and probably the expertise they're developing around that. But the things around, mentioning the better mortgage rates for energy efficient and lower greenhouse gas emissions buildings, and the role that they're playing in that, the millions of dollars that are available now for projects for building decarbonization work, and the role that Bright Power is working on helping to actually deploy that efficiency and decarbonization in the real world. Like they're at such an exciting place, working in partnership with these entities that are providing these incentives or making these loans, and making sure that the intent of this massive public investment is that intent is translated into real productive decarbonization work. I mean, I imagine it's very heady to be involved in all that, and I felt it very encouraging to hear about how that is having a real world impact and that it just seems like everything is just exploding, which is, I'm sure, scary, but also so necessary.
Well, she said they need to grow their passive house capacity to keep up with that demand. I don't know too many other parts of any sector that has that rate of growth. 100% growth rate year on year, particularly in a climate where some other industries are really struggling. That's pretty incredible. Even if it's not sustained over the long term, I don't think you can sustain that sort of growth rate over a long term. But that's a really good sign of where things are heading. And she mentioned that the passive houses basically become a standard. If not full certification, then at least that's level of performance is what most client or many of their clients are just expecting these days. They're just like, yeah, do it. Let's get into it.
Well, and then you have and there's so much going on in New York. And according to FIAS's numbers show a doubling of square footage of FIAS projects every 2 years. We of course know that there's exponential growth happening in renewable energy too. But on back to the buildings, like in Massachusetts, where I just was hanging out with folks and talking about another place where the rubber is meeting the road. Passive house is becoming code in most of Massachusetts, Boston, all of the big major population centers. So it's is
that actual passive house or cited as passive house, not just equivalents?
Yes, FIAS or PHI certification. Yeah, it's not. So it's called the Specialized Opt-in something code or something like that.
Stretch code, right?
So it's stretch code, right? But it's that opt-in is something that separate jurisdictions around Massachusetts get to do if they want to, and they're doing it. So if you look at the numbers of jurisdictions, I think there are probably more jurisdictions that haven't done it than have done it, perhaps. But even those are moving like either it's thermal energy demand intensity or passive house. But the ones who have chosen passive house are the big population centers. It's crazy. Like it's actually happened. Like this dream of passive house becoming code is happening. Yeah.
I have to say that I really appreciated her saying that. It was, speaking of code, that it was nice being on the code development group for the state of New York, which is, I guess, has set having passive house be code by 2030 for New York, if I understood her correctly.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
But just because anybody else that I've heard about, working on code development has always been like, oh, it's these grueling long-term meetings. And you said, oh yeah, it's nice being on it. I'm like, okay, great. You're the right person for the job.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, back to that original question, where can I have the most impact? I mean, it's an incredible opportunity to have someone like Andrea on a board, on a committee like that, on a board and directing things like building codes, because that really lifts up the bottom. It's all good inspiring people at the top end to do amazing things, but if we lift up the floor, then that brings everyone up, which is a lot of what the code is about. Ilka, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I agree that it just felt so different talking to her, because it feels like it is finally happening, because it's been, we've been around for many years now, and there were many years that it was just, pushing a big weight forward, or at least it felt like that. And now just talking to her just felt like, this is working now. This is gaining momentum. And then once that happens, there's so many more opportunities, right? Like just getting then into the details about, there are more, there's different equipment that we can now use. And there's just more development in geothermal, and I don't know, just things that just seemed so hard. And there's just so much resistance for so long. All of a sudden just feels like the knot is kind of opening. And I just really hope that it keeps going that way.
Yeah, and she alluded to the next frontier is around retrofits, and that getting that to the NFIT kind of level is a little bit challenging at the moment to get to past feasibility, but that is the next challenge to get to that level of uptake is what do we do, with retrofitting existing buildings. But I get the sense that an organisation like Bright Power is well placed to do that with their experience and success in the growth of the work that they're doing with new builds, because that they are doing a lot of retrofit work in New York as well.
I also thought it was really interesting what she was what she said about like pre-manufacturing. That it seemed like for her it's not quite there yet because of all the upfront coordination. And I agree that's something that gets missed a lot, where we always think, oh yeah, prefabrication is the way to scale up, and in some ways it is. But you can't forget about all the stuff that has to happen before panels actually arrive on site, and that there's a lot of working hours involved in making that work on all sides.
It's easy. It's an easy word to say, but it can mean so many different things, and there's so many details to sort out for different types of buildings and different situations. But definitely part of the picture. I want to pick up on one thing that she said early on in your discussion about comparing affordable housing and luxury housing. And I don't remember the exact quote, but it was, what I took out of it was that affordable buildings often perform better and are better built than luxury. And this is something that I've been conscious of trying to communicate recently when we talk about high end and what high end means, because a lot of focus in magazines and in architecture awards gets put on quote unquote high end architecture, which is often expensive and deemed as luxury. But we're seeing really good examples here and elsewhere of social housing, affordable housing that's not luxury, but it works really, really well. And that's, Passive House is definitely contributing to that, of providing great homes to all types of people. So I think it's useful, I think, for us just to think about how we communicate quality in terms of performance and what the buildings are actually achieving, not just beautiful windows and fancy joinery and expansive kitchens and living spaces. So yeah, I think it was a bit subtle, but I just wanted to highlight that comment.
I really like what she said about mentorship. That stuck with me.
Yes.
That she's saying everyone does as much as they can, and then we expect the next generation to build upon that and basically lead the next generation, and not being stuck with all the knowledge and power that you just kind of try and keep just to you. So I really like that position.
Well, clearly there's some pretty amazing people doing some amazing work across the whole industry, which is great to see. All right. Hey, well, thank you, Ilka and Mary, as always. Fantastic conversations that you have with these people. Zach, we're still on a bit of a break at Accelerator.
Yeah, for live programming, we're taking August off for our Passive House Accelerator lives. So we'll dive back into those on the first Wednesday of September, the first Thursday for you in New Zealand, with a 101 session. But we've got a few weeks of break, and so but that doesn't mean that we're not doing new podcast episodes and new videos. Our Reimagine Buildings channel is very active. We're putting together a new video each week. So there's one that we published last week with Vlad Petzel and his Passive House Plus project, to his own single family home in the Boston area. And then the week before that was a story about a family that is rebuilding to Passive House after their home was burned down in the Marshall Fire. One about a school in Seattle. Lots of really great people on the Reimagine Buildings channel. So check that out, please.
Nice. I shared the links to Reimagine just yesterday. Somebody was asking me hey, tell me about these passive house things where you can't open the windows. And I went straight to Passive House 101 and directed them to the Reimagine YouTube channel. So it is a great resource for using this time to catch up on all the stuff that's there, but also directing other people to it. Awesome. All right. Hey, well, thanks a lot, team. Good to see you again, Mary and Ilka. And Zach will be back again next week on Passive House Podcast.
And enjoy those soccer games.
Will do.
Or football, I guess.
Football. It's football. Yeah.